be mindful if you try to share your screen.
I believe we're live, by the way.
Yep, it looks like we're live. Awesome. Welcome everyone to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, April 6th, 2022. We'll be following along in the agenda that was posted in issue number 565 here in the RFC's repo. Just a quick reminder for folks, these calls and all comms on the RFC's repo and the NPM repos are covered under Code of Conduct. For these calls specifically, we ask you just please be kind. As other folks are talking, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Appreciate folks jumping on after a long delay. We haven't run one of these calls in about a month or so. And I just want to reiterate the desired outcomes from the conversations here is to push forward design ideas, gather feedback from the community, help ideally get some rough consensus on different topics, and utilize this as a forum for so hopefully helpful discourse beyond what we do asynchronously in GitHub issues and pull requests themselves. So hopefully the RFC call has been a mechanism for innovation and pushing the NPM CLI forward over the last couple of years, and I think it has been. So happy folks are still attending, and hopefully see out more as we continue to do this. So one quick announcement that I had and I want to share with y'all is that we've publicized now an issue denoting a number of the ideal changes we would like to make for NPM v9. It's a bit of a roadmap. There's a number of breaking changes in there, not fully fleshed out. Some of the issues need detail, and we'll get more granular as time goes on here. But it gives you kind of a high level idea of what we're thinking about and trying to queue up for the next major version of NPM. And so I've linked that here in the meeting notes, but we'll also share it here in chat for folks to easily go check out. Feel free to ask any questions over the next few weeks as we get into sort of the weeds of that. Most of the breaking changes we consider and hope are pretty non-controversial. A number of them are changing some config defaults. We again want to see NPM v9 be a gradual breaking change, if you can, or if you will, as V8 was very minimal in terms of changes, except for I think Node engines was one of the few things we changed, as well as I think programmatic usage of the CLI and consumption of the CLI as a package changed in V8. So V9 ideally is a version that folks can adopt easily, and we'll sort of standardize some same defaults is sort of the goals there. So expect that issue to sort of evolve over time. It may be de-scoped as well, so just be mindful not everything on that list will stay. It's pretty large right now, and we are trying to work within a sort of a time window here that's reasonable over the next roughly 3 to 6 months. So that's the one big announcement that I had, but want to open up the floor for folks if anybody else had any other announcements. If not, we can dive right into the agenda. We do have a jam-packed agenda, so we tried to break this out into 2 separate sections. For the folks that just jumped on, I will again paste the HackMD meeting notes. Feel free to add yourselves as attendees to that list, just so we denote that you jumped on the call. So some quick updates from some previous RFC discussions. We want to talk a little bit about number 482, the RFC around output. I think want to just bring this back up. I'm not sure, Luke, if you're available to speak to some of the improvements that we've been making around output. I know that this was something that you had looked into before, but maybe you could speak to anything that we're doing in this space.
Yes. Let me try to get my context back after a month off. I haven't read this one recently, but I believe we decided to do our best to print anything that the user could use to standard out, such as recoverable errors, things they could do something about, e-resolve, like a package missing, and then use standard error for anything else that we can't guarantee is going to be formatted, such as crashes and things of that nature. So this has not been implemented yet, but we're working towards it in a combination with making the output nicer and cleaner. A number of changes that I want to make around the progress bar, removing that and just making the kind of the logs going by as the indication that something is happening, and add more of those to steps such as extracting archives where things can take a long time and we don't necessarily output what is happening. There's been a few cases of that where extraction can take minutes depending on the size of the package, and you don't know what's happening. So improvements in that area, as well as I just drew a blank on what else we're doing. The log file as well. The log file should now be streaming. So if you have a runaway process, which we've had a few of those bugs, you now have a log file in place from the start that you can look at to see what went wrong instead of only if we complete.
Is this one issue, do we feel like we can close this out though with essentially that update? Is that, I can probably take this off the agenda for next week?
Yeah, this can be taken off the agenda. I believe it was my action item to at least post what our the resolution from the last call was. So I've not done that yet, but I can do that, and this can be taken off the agenda.
Awesome. Thank you. Moving on quickly to the second update we had. I think this is yours, Fritzy. We've been doing some work in the space of respecting and fixing up our resolved field support with that from documents that are returning from a registry, essentially a resolved field. Maybe Fritzy can speak to some of the work that we've done there.
Yeah, so right now, looking at releasing a new feature that is called replace registry host. And so you can set that to the default right now, which is npm.js, or to never. And so you never replace, Pacument host links. And then, in the future, we could add always. So you always replace everything, no matter what the host is, with whatever is configured. I think, this RFC goes into more than just host replacement. I haven't read it recently. But yeah, that's the progress being made right now.
Yeah, Caleb, I know that you were a proponent of this, and I think the author of one of the PRs, or maybe the RFC originally. Does what Fritz sort of mentioned there, does that align, or like would that help resolve some of the issues that you were having with?
I think so. I'd like to see more details. If you look at the pull request, I've implemented 2 different options, and one of them sounds like what he described, which is to replace the registry. But is that when you create a lock file or when you're reading a lock file?
It's when you're reading a lock file or a Pacument.
Yeah. So one of the use cases we have is that we change our registries a lot. And if you ever record a lock file using a custom registry, that ends up in the lock file, and the proposed behavior of replacing the default registry wouldn't work in that case. So one of the features that I've implemented in the PR is an option to override the registry that you record. So even if you're using a private registry, the lock file that's spit out is using the default registry.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
We had talked about recording that information, and I think that probably needs some more further discussion, like that's specific feature, because there might be a lot of redundancy like in recording that config, like the registry config. Right now it's a magic value, obviously. But yeah, we can keep this on our radar and keep talking about it and crack it open, maybe that specific aspect of it, if hopefully Fritzy's work is lands and helps resolve at least one of the problems you were having.
Yeah, I would love to review any docs or proposals that he's written. And like this PR has been open with a needs discussion tag, and I don't know what next steps I have to drive those discussions other than this RFC meeting.
Yeah, I'll take a closer look at those PRs again, and we'll come up with a plan.
Yeah, actually, if you can reach out, you're in the Node tooling working group now, right, Caleb? Is that right?
I'm in a couple of Slack channels. I don't think that I'm in a specific working group.
Sorry, that's what I meant by Slack channels, or maybe I said working group. But that's one of the places we can at least chat about this. So maybe Fritz, if you can async pass along some of the work that you've been doing, we can look into it. Yeah,
sounds great.
And Roy, did you have?
Yeah, real quick, I was taking notes here. I just want to make sure, Fritzy, when you mentioned the replace registry host, is there anything we can link to, an issue, something already, or is it just
issue on this? There's an issue on the status board.
Cool. Yeah, we can link it just for the notes here.
Yeah, I'll find that and put it in chat.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Cool. So is that okay, Caleb, if you and Fritz sync up after this call at some point between now and the next meeting for sure? Because we're looking to land something quickly here, which may be a little bit different than what you had originally proposed, but at the same time, then we can figure out what it is from the original proposal we want to continue to discuss. And I'm guessing it's probably the recording of the registry config. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Moving on to the next item, which again is yours. And this is actually something that has come up a couple times where I said, like, why don't we just land this? But NPM copy, the PR has been open for a little while. Caleb, I know you were excited about this. I don't see, I haven't heard or seen any kind of like pushback yet from folks. I'm not sure if anybody's looked into this. I know it's in a draft state, so I'm just wondering if you might be able to get time to finish it out and we can properly review it and maybe just land it.
Okay. I realize this is my fault then. I should have moved it out of a draft. I think it was ready. I wrote tests. I don't know if it needs more tests. They're failing right now after I rebased yesterday, but I can get that fixed up and I'll pull the draft tag and we don't have to talk about that more here.
Cool. I'm very excited by this too. And I think a couple of folks are for sure. So yeah, that'd be awesome to land. So
thanks.
And if folks have any objections or they want to go learn more, the PR is actually 498. Is that right? It says, oh, this is the docs. The actual PR is 4082 on the CLI repo. So thanks for sharing that. Moving on to item number 4 for updates. Just wanted to quickly note package distributions. I know there's been a bunch of feedback on that. I have not had any time to schedule a call. Like I said, I would before we took a break. And I want to just circle back with the fact that there hasn't been any updates, I know, to the actual RFC yet, but that's going to be on my radar here. This is definitely going to be something that's like a long-term RFC that I'm guessing is going to take, a few months here to figure out all the nuance too. There's also potentially still a separate RFC to be created for optional depth conditionals or whatever you would call that. So just to say the update is there's no major update there. Moving on to number 5, this shared version specifications. This was a thread that popped up where somebody wanted to essentially define, I think, are they on the call? Yeah. Did you want to speak to this?
No, I just want to confirm my presence.
Great. Yeah, so basically this is something that we've seen in the ecosystem quite a bit, where people want to pin various SDKs or frameworks to the same version, and when they install one, they want to essentially or update one of those packages, they want to lock the rest in place. When we were implementing overrides, Nilf, who's on this call, Nathan Lafreniere, had the great idea to implement into overrides a reference, essentially a reference alias, I guess you would call it, or just a reference name. So you can actually kind of work around this problem by utilizing overrides to specify essentially a dependency version that is reliant or going to map to the version you want to tie that to. So in the example I think that we had there was, maybe like, let's say React and some React plugin that you want to React import or something like that. Then you can tie the specific version to React in the override and reference that for the version. And I think that works around the need, and I just want to confirm that that's the case, and we could potentially close out this and just backlog the fact that direct dependencies need to be overridden, which is something that we did originally spec, but I know was a bit complicated when I know Nilf was looking into it. So
yeah, if I may, I think that would be the best compromise with all the issues with the original PR. I think that could strike a good chord with everyone involved.
That's awesome. If that works, then that's great. Like, I would be a +1 to that, and I think it's like, solves the issue.
For me, it's fine.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. So yeah, there is a to-do for us to actually make that possible, because I think that we do not support direct dependency overrides right now. And that was a design choice that we can, I think, ship in a minor, because it's right now just erroring. So yeah, we can circle back on that in the future here. So last on the updates, improving workspaces. So Tierney, I know you had proposed this symlinking experience. I think Roy had a few updates that he wanted to share on what we've been doing to improve workspaces and that linking.
Yeah, do you want to add something, Tierney? But yeah, otherwise, I think it's kind of a simple, actionable idea. We kind of just put it in the backlog and worked on it. So we implemented, but not for the specific example that Tierney used there for, which was npm init. But we implemented it for npm version. So there is kind of like a prior art now, and we just want to basically get that same functionality and put it also in npm init. Makes a lot of sense. So that once you init, you initialize a new workspace, the entire install tree is already kind of wrapped up together, right? The symlink will already be in the node modules folder, so it will behave as expected for the final user. So yeah, so yeah, just to recap, we implemented for npm version. So once you cut a version of a specific workspace, we do that behavior of basically running a really small refi. And we're planning to just pick that up and do the same kind of work for npm init. And maybe in the future more, if we identify other commands that can use that same logic, it might be reapplied elsewhere.
Awesome. And I think that's it for updates. Does this, in terms of the actual RFC, is this something that we should close out then, if we're just essentially going ahead and implementing that? Are you okay with that, Tierney, if we close that issue?
Yep, totally fine. If we're implementing it, totally chill.
Cool.
Thank you.
Awesome. So moving on to new items, and we've got quite a few. So I want to quickly time box each one of these if we can to roughly 5 minutes. If we run a little bit long on a few of the longer ones, like I would say cap out at 10 minutes here. So we try to get through as many as we can. Appreciate how many folks have jumped on, and also how many RFCs have essentially being added to this backlog. But the first one we have up here is a breaking change to npm bin. We thought this would be a quick discussion. I know, Jordan, you had commented on this, just to be mindful of existing tooling that might be relying on the current behavior and output of npm bin when there is a non-existent path.
Yeah, the comment was just to call out that, like, so putting npm bin in your path is incredibly unsafe and insecure, and people shouldn't do it, but lots of people do, especially because npx didn't used to exist, and with npx's existence, the utility of putting npm bin in your path kind of eroded. So I'm glad to see this change made. It should happen, but it should be very clearly called out that anybody who is doing this will, like, may see a behavior change, and that they should also, regardless, they should be encouraged to switch to using npx. And I think that if there's a way to also tell them how to use npx such that it cannot install anything, that would also help people migrate to it. That was my thoughts.
Yeah, so you'll notice actually that the issue that was linked here, it was formerly an issue or a bug issue on the CLI repo. We've moved it to the status board and actually added it to the V9 roadmap because it is breaking change. We wanted to make sure we captured it, but I think we agreed kind of like with the next steps and just have added it to that backlog for V9. Go ahead, Gar.
I also wonder, would it be not breaking if it outputted an empty string? That's what this is. Like, I guess I'm trying to wonder if they're putting in their path, like if you just have : will that work fine?
Do you mean like the severiness of that change versus the?
Yeah, like I'm saying, if a user has in their profile, their shell profile has said like path equals path : $parens npm bin, right, : something else. Will that break if it starts successfully returning an empty string when that folder doesn't exist?
Their expectations might be broken of what was returning before. I guess that's what we're trying to avoid, but that's in a minor version.
So that's fair. I guess what I'm saying is I think that everybody who's using this command is using it in the way I've described, in which case it might be fine. So maybe it actually doesn't need to be called out that much, even if you still want to wait for V9.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway.
Go ahead, Gar.
What's the value of this command?
What's the value of npm repo, npm homepage?
I use npm repo.
Oh, I use those. Are great. Those are amazing.
So like defining or outputting, echoing, like config. What's the value of that? I don't know.
I've used it in the past because I'm one of these that these people that publish bash modules to the npm registry. So like sometimes you want to hack things like, run a quick way to just without, maybe it was before npx. Yeah, maybe using npx is just always better these days, but still I kind of used it in the past. It was very handy, but maybe I was also doing something really hacky back then.
Yeah, my question is, should we deprecate this in 8 and remove it in 9? Like, if it's a thing that npx has completely removed the need for this, and it's only inviting bad behavior, why is it here? And is there a way they could get this in? Yeah.
I mean, I guess I can see that because if you're running this in a deeply nested, like if you're running this in deeper inside a project, does it give you does it just always print out node modules /bin, or does it go up and find the node modules folder and print it out?
I think it finds
so.
the backstop, not the backstop, but like
it's your local
so
prefix.
there might be utility for locating the project root, in which case perhaps a new command that just tells you the closest package JSON or the closest folder containing a package JSON and a node modules or whatever, like something like that might, combined with NPX, might remove any possible usefulness of the command.
Isn't it npm prefix or something?
npm prefix, if you haven't monkeyed with it.
Just the command, top level command, not the.
Oh,
Yes,
not the
npm
config
prefix
one.
shows you the thing bin and all those uses as its backstop.
interesting. Okay, well, I didn't know that existed.
Right, I think it's a Garth point. It's a good one. Like maybe we should put that out there. Let's see if there's feedback, but we should probably move on to the next.
Yeah. So that's one thing to discuss, I guess, for next time, or leave as an open question whether or not we just want to get rid of it. So it's a V9 feature either way. Moving on to the second item, that new item we had, which is run scripts with workspaces should short circuit on script error. I don't remember exactly what this was referencing, but I think Gar, you were the one that added this. Yeah.
I can maybe start. I was just taking a look at it right before the call. But if you want
to, as described, it just seems like a bug, like straight up.
No, this was discussed when we wrote and implemented.
Okay.
I wrote this.
Yeah.
We all discussed this and we agreed you want them all to run so you know which ones fail. Like this was the decision made at the time.
Yeah. Oh, right. So they're not, the exit code will still indicate that something failed. They're complaining because they want the short circuiting. I see.
They want to stop running all the other stuff if one of them fails. And when we wrote this, it was a very explicit decision not to do it that way.
So the other thing that I think people want often with running scripts in workspaces is to have a makefile like dependency chain. So you don't just run all the scripts, but you run them in the proper order. And I would imagine in that kind of world, you actually want them to short circuit. And so maybe instead of building just short circuiting, we could focus on how do we build a proper dependency chain of scripts and then just include short circuiting there. Because I can't imagine wanting like that without the short circuiting. Like you wouldn't want to run the tests for project 2 if the build for project 1 failed, because you can't do that. You can't test it, like things like that. But
I think that's later orthogonal. Yeah. I think that's a bit orthogonal to this explicitly, but like you're talking about almost like pipelines.
I'm saying conceptually, I don't think it is orthogonal. I'm saying that in practice, I think that this issue is subsumed by pipelines or whatever you want to call it. Because pipelines would have to have short circuiting behavior, and people actually want the pipeline behavior, not the short circuiting behavior by itself. That's my supposition.
Yeah. So I think exec and run scripts, I think both function the same way here. And if any, like the decision, as Gar's referring to it, was made that we didn't have a mechanism for like to essentially fast fail or to fail to error, and we can. I think Tierney obviously proposes like a flag like fast fail or something like that we could opt into that behavior, right? So this is something that we could add, and that can be applied to any like exec and run script. And then again, the idea of like how scripts are being run is, I think, a little bit like in what order they're being run is a bit different than failing once you like not running them all and failing early when anything in that chain fails. So I don't know. I'm a +1 on adding something like this to opt into that behavior.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
So maybe we can give that feedback. Unfortunately, John wasn't able to join us, but we can give them the reasoning why it is like it is today, and then also provide them with the idea to add an RFC for specifically something like a fast fail or something to run script and exec. Cool. Any other comments or feedback on that? If not, we'll jump to the next one, which is RFC 539. This is auditing lock files for injection. Fritzy, you proposed this.
Yeah, so I mean, the basic idea is that someone could edit a lock file, or maybe this applies to shrink wraps in a dependency, but if it doesn't match the package JSON, you know, they could do something nefarious. There's an argument like, well, if they're editing files in your repo, they can do all sorts of things. But I think Nelf took a stab at this already.
Yeah, I think you've been doing some work in that area enough to verify log files with CI. I think npm CI specifically, but I'm not sure if that else.
Yeah, it validates that the actual tree structure is correct, but it does not validate for things like missing fields.
Okay, so the
like
log
if
file.
you're,
Okay.
It'll make sure that you don't have invalid dependency trees in there, but it won't make sure that there's not like missing integrity fields or anything like that.
Is that enough?
It's a good question. I don't honestly know.
Like if the tree is accurate, like the integrity fields, etc., add some level of extra, you know.
Yeah, the integrity
security.
fields. Yeah, the integrity fields, if we made sure those existed, then that would allow us to actually verify things. But if they don't exist, then we have to go fetch the packages from the registry, backfill them, and then we'd have to nuke your node modules and start over to guarantee that you had those tarballs extracted.
Yeah, and you know what happens if they you know, put in a new integrity value, right? Like, so there's, yeah.
Right, because we have no means, we can't generate integrity based on what they've already got installed, because it's not going to be the same system to system. We have to get the integrity stream from the actual tarballs. And then we have to, the only way we know if that's right is to re-extract them, because we can't verify something once it's already been extracted to disk.
Yeah, so what I've seen in the ecosystem is folks have written like actions, GitHub actions, or like any kind of like CI test to do this lock file validation, and they basically do an install and then just compare like a diff the two things. And like that's what I've seen in terms of tooling in this space for doing that validation, because to your point, you basically have to do a full install and go capture the relevant manifest files with the integrity values to ensure that that's accurate. So I'm not sure if we can provide like a ton of value in this space, but I'm not sure if Fritz, if you had any ideas in this proposal, like.
Well, I mean, we could take the work that Nelf's done and formalize it into its own output that where they could run it explicitly and say, hey, let's just do the validation. Let's generate a report. It'll give people feel good vibes about it anyway, a way to explicitly run it. And then, you know, there could be a note in there or in documentation that this happens during install or CI or wherever else it happens too. So.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can just shove like a check into into Doctor or something like that instead of putting this extra validation into like hot pass, right? Like that might slow things down. Yeah, it's a sandy check essentially, right? So if you don't feel like anybody else has been touching, like your very first comment was the arguments have been made that if anybody can modify something on your disk, like
Right.
or to your repo, that like what kind of value are we adding with a tool like this? So like just making it easy for npm to be that CI check, like somebody could literally in actions just run npm doctor and then it would fail potentially because it ran the package lock check, then that might be enough to be like, hey, I don't have to add another kind of tool to my tool chain.
Is a Doctor rework part of the proposed V9 changes?
We can slip some refactor tech debt in, but it's pretty hefty without that. Yeah, that isn't on the radar right now.
Okay.
We could potentially add something like that because npm doctor really does need a facelift, and I think that there is reason to be able to run independent checks like npm doctor foo, whatever it is, if it's env, if it's etc., would be nice to do. But yeah, Jordan, I see you on.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this isn't. I think like it in general, npm doctor should be great and better and usable as a CI check. That's awesome. I think that this particular case, GitHub shows or hides package lock, like lock file diffs by default. The entire ecosystem trains us to rubber stamp those diffs and ignore them. Only the most paranoid folks even take a look at them, and that's not most. So I think that it's incredibly critical that npm install by default fails in this case, so that it's not possible to land these sort of malicious changes. It's true that a malicious dependency could overwrite files, but like you can use Node's policies features to like protect your app during runtime. You can, develop in a Docker container on your machine and not worry about it. But if a malicious package is hidden in a lock file, like, and nobody knows it's there, then that's, that seems like a bad thing. I mean, I know how to, like, I've seen that, but I guess it seems entirely. It seems like if there's any risk of something being hidden in the lock file that's not easily surfaced, and like that's worthy of very eager action. And I think the other thing is humans aren't supposed to be editing the lock file. I would be very happy if changing one character in the lock file failed everything always. Only npm should be touching it. Like if it weren't for reviewability, I would say npm should be encrypting it so that nobody else can touch it. But like you need it to be reviewable for the paranoid folks. So like I think that in this particular case, it should just be the default behavior. That the lock file the lock file's own integrity is checked essentially.
Yeah.
So Nelf, do the changes that you make, do they fail if there's an integrity problem, or do they correct the integrity problem?
They won't do anything at all with an integrity problem. It'll only validate and throw errors for things like if you have a requirement on 1.0.0 of a dep, but what's in your tree is actually 2.0.0, then that's an invalid edge, and that'll throw an error. But that's all.
That'll throw an error and stop everything on install, or only CI?
On CI.
Okay.
On install, it'll just try to fix it.
Yeah, I think on install, it's trying to be like a self-healing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think there's some more discussion to be had on this. We should probably keep it open for another little bit. But want to quickly move on and time box that to the next RFC that we had, which is Jordan's, which is add or obey user specified specs, which I think I don't know if there's going to be a lot of controversy around this, but like feel free to.
Yeah, I mean, explain. I hope not. so my use case is ESLint in 8.9 broke a use case of mine. And so my ESLint config has a peer dep on equals 8.8.0. And I put the equals in there instead of just omitting a range because it's nice and explicit. And it means like somebody else who sees it should know that I did it on purpose. So when I go to do the updates, I type this npm install command with the equals in it. And it puts the caret in the package.json, which then can break things later. And in fact, it fails the peer dep in CI like almost immediately. So what I want is for when I tell npm to install it with an equal sign, for it to install it with an equal sign. When there's no prefix at all, when there's no range character there at all, then I think it's awesome that npm just uses the save prefix and defaults it to the most reasonable thing. It may be a bug that it's ignoring it. I don't know. It feels, yeah, equal is definitely a valid semper range. Always has been. So
A bug.
yeah, maybe that's just a simple bug. I just kind of wanted to, I think it's always worked this way. Like I couldn't find an npm version that did what I wanted here. So it's not like an introduced bug. I think it's just not a common use case. So
yeah, but I believe it drops any of these prefixes, right? Even if you try to install with tilde, it will replace with the save prefix. So you can configure the save prefix option.
Yeah, I think that in general, like if I've typed like 2.x, it is great. I think it's the right thing to resolve that to a version and then put it with the caret in package.json. But if I've typed tilde 2.1, I don't think it should ever use the save prefix. I think it should just use the tilde. It should resolve the version to 2.1 point whatever, and then it should put that in there with a tilde. And or same with, I don't know, greater equals is, that one is more useful on peer deps. But if I put in peer deps, like greater than or equal to 3, I actually want the peer dep to be greater than or equal to 3. I don't want it to be 17, right? Or whatever the latest version happens to be.
Yeah, I think with the mental model here is if I'm using a prefix to install a dependency, use that prefix, right? And ignore the save prefix. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all agree that this is something that needs to be
beautiful.
Fixed. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. I want to quickly move on because that's pretty uncontroversial. And we may still want to wait till V9 just to land it, but like that's definitely like we want to fix that. So so number 5 here, which is RFC 548, adding flag for npm commands to run intransitive dependencies, to run builds in transitive dependencies. I think Zach, you jumped on. This is your proposal or your thread.
Yeah, I'm actually okay if npm doesn't want to do this, but I want there to be a decision that npm is not going to support it. We currently use, and I'm guessing a lot of others use Lerna to do some of that transitive dependency builds that I think it was Jordan was talking about, where when we build, especially with TypeScript, makes it a lot more convoluted. But when we build service B, if service B is dependent on package A, and package A is dependent on package B, Lerna, Turbo Repo, Yarn, Workspaces, I think all will build that in the topological order. So they'll build package B, then package A, and then the service. So essentially, we would like to we've been using npmi instead of Lerna Bootstrap for ever since 7 came out almost, and that is the only thing we're still keeping Lerna around for, is to run commands. And we'd like, because it's mostly abandoned, we'd like to move off of it entirely. So bonus points if that could work from the edge too, where we have lots of junior developers that come in and expect to just be able to cd into the directory, npm build, npm start. But that obviously there's a lot more nuance to that. Thankfully, npmi is now context aware, but you still got to cd back to the root, run the scripts with Lerna, then you can cd back into your edge folder and develop like normal.
Yeah, so I think I left a reference here to, and I just nested it in the notes to myself because I was looking at this before the call, to Turbo Repos pipelines, and just like the idea of more explicitly creating those dependencies for like builds, like saying that this depends on that, versus just utilizing like the dependency, like the understanding of like what needs to run before, like what dependency needs to run and be built before I can run my script. But yeah, I'm interested in what other folks have to say about this. Tierney, I'm not sure. Go ahead.
I think if the rest of the ecosystem, like you literally just named every other tool doing this, if the rest of the ecosystem is doing this, not you, but like Zachary, if the rest of the ecosystem is doing this, we should probably try to not deviate from that expectation and force people to have additional tooling. Like I think reducing dependencies for, if a single tool allows teams to get rid of a dependency, I think that's fine. So sorry, Darcy. Yes, I'm saying you have to build the thing.
Yeah, you're pushing us in the direction because, yeah, if everybody does it, why doesn't npm? Ugh.
Yeah, I raised my hand for the same comment. NPM run scripts are a necessary reinvention of make files, and like they lack the biggest nice feature of make files, which is declaring dependencies and having make just magically figure out the ordering and what can be parallelized and what can't, and so on. And npm has all that information. The graph is right there. So like npm already used it to do the install. So it seems like it should be, trivial is the wrong word, but it should be straightforward to take that information and then say, like, which of these things in the graph are part of the workspace? And for those things, that determines the ordering of their tasks and the dependency of their tasks. And like, seems like it should just work kind of the way people expect with that. And it makes it really easy for everyone to change ordering, because then they can just add or remove like dependencies for it. And then if we discover we need overrides for things, then that would be the thing to add.
And I don't know this because I haven't used this in my own projects, but just to clarify, and Zach, you may know this, but do people deviate from that relationship, from the dependency relationship in the tooling? That's why I reference pipelines, because it seems like they deviate from just like dependencies as the thing, but they've actually said like, oh, I can specify specific dependency.
Not that I know of. I mean, the use case as I understand it is parent, like A depends on B. I want B built before I try to do anything with A. And that includes running tests or linting or, even building A, because what's the point of building A if A's dependency fails to build, right? Yeah. And go ahead.
The specific thing is like when we build, we want to build in order. When we test, we want to test in order. When we start, we want to start in order. The only time that's deviated is if it's not going to get symlinked. So if you, for example, like we publish all of our shared packages, if you're on an older version of that package, you're gonna get the already built JavaScript files if it's a TypeScript project, right? From that old version installed at the edge. So you're not gonna have to worry about building that one first. But if you are on the version of the workspace that is going to get symlinked, it needs to, or the expected outcome is you run npm build from an edge in a workspaces repo, you expect that command to succeed by default. Now, obviously, as we've gotten more experience with it, we don't anymore, but that would be like the optimal, or at least expected.
Yeah. Go ahead, Gar. I see your hands up.
This seems weird to me, because if I want to run tests in one workspace, I don't want to run tests in another workspace, just because it's like if I've got two workspaces and one's dependent on the other, and I just want to run the test, why is it all of a sudden say, oh, let me run these tests first? That means that build is now special or test or unspecial. So this is weird to me that it's just going to magically do that. I think if we look at this, it should be something like prepare. Okay, prepare is already special, right? Prepare is the thing for this.
Yeah.
So maybe we can prepare script do that, or we had a flag. I don't think it should be do this by default, because that doesn't make any. If I run npm test in a workspace and it starts, that's gonna. I don't like that.
No, I
Yeah,
completely
with
agree for the record.
non-default. Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
completely agree with non-default. It should be an option where it's run my dependencies first, or an option, but because you're right, especially like in our monorepo where we fan out our tests, like we don't want to run every test. It would defeat the purpose.
What I'm
And
assuming
so-
would happen by default is that if I explicitly run the tests in A and B, and there is a dependency relationship between them, that npm just figures that out for me and runs them in the proper order. But if I run A by itself, obviously I don't want any of B's tasks to run.
That's
unless I have
orthogonal to
an
this,
extra
though.
flag.
He's saying, if I run a script in A and A depends on B, and I've got this flag on, it's going to run that same flag in B before it
With
runs
the
in
flag.
A.
Right. I
Right,
agree
that
with
flag.
the flag. That makes sense. But I'm saying that by default, if I run on both A and B, that npm should just know the order that needs to run in, because it already has that information and should order it for me.
Okay, that would be a separate thing than this.
Okay.
I mean, it would fall out of that.
Yeah, like maybe it would fall out of that, but I guess that's what I'm saying is like, because the common case is going to be, I want to run npm test on the entire workspace at once. And I don't necessarily I feel like when there is that dependency relationship, the default behavior should be to respect it. And that like magically pulling in extra dependents that are happening in the workspace, that's a fine extra flag. But I feel like these two are not entirely orthogonal, because they still relate to the same thing, which is trying to do workspace tasks when child works, when the sub projects or whatever, like have dependency relationships that the user shouldn't have to keep in their head.
I agree that that's probably a separate RFC. That I think I would also be just as agreeing with, but we should probably, because this one's big, we should probably separate that discussion.
Fair enough.
Are you okay with keeping this open for a bit, Zach? Just so we can have some more discussion about it. But I think that, yeah, it sounds like we kind of are on the same page, that if every other tool is supporting this and you really want to get off Lerna, and that was like one of the not goals of, but like definitely like the hopes that we could really support that ecosystem. That if this is one of the missing features, potentially we can help support this use case. Roy, I see your hands up.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to maybe clarify, like, because we did try to work a while ago on adding the kind of the topological dependency when running the post install scripts that come at the end of a refi, right? Because for these, like, I think it's just a bug, like they should have been running in order since the beginning, right? That kind of breaks a few monorepos out there. So, and I mean, like if we're to work on this, I think then we can like kind of use the same logic to just apply at the end of refi. But should we have that conversation together at the same time? That's what a kind of thing like I was thinking on, right? Because for all the post refi, like the pre-install, post-install, prepare, right? All of these should be kind of like, if you have to cross dependencies in your workspaces, like kind of need that, like, right? Otherwise, the only way around that is kind of like either using single workspace flags to order manually, or just have like alphabetical order, kind of like respecting that order that you need for your builds. Like, but that's very unreliable.
I guess I kind of liken this, and I don't think that we have to have these together, but you're saying that they are like tangential to each other. Once we do one, we basically get the other for free. I do think that is probably a bug if we're not supporting like properly reifying like workspaces or running like, let's say, certain scripts like prepare post install scripts in workspaces today. Then it probably is a bug in how we implemented workspaces and those commands. What I might also just let the group, at least how I think of this, is what do we do for Git dependencies, Git repos and dependencies? We prepare and run prepare scripts, and we pack dependencies in order for them to be consumed by you, right? And so I kind of like in workspaces in this case, like in order for them to be useful and be a part of that dependency chain, we should probably be running prepare, etc., like on that workspace, right? So if we're not doing that today, and I know that that's an outstanding, I think RFC, or it's an outstanding issue right now, like we probably should be doing that, and that might help in this regard. Once we do that, then we also can say, well, when I'm doing a run script or I'm running exec, I want to opt into also running that whole chain of like scripts. Did anybody else have any comments they want to make? And we're pretty much right up against time here. This is definitely something we'll keep on our radar. We didn't get to a number of RFCs. I just wanted to quickly note for folks that are interested, there is some interest around improving the before flag, which I know Miles has proposed here, having sort of some changes to that. There's also the dependency selector syntax and npm query, which I've proposed. It's been something I've considered for a long time, and I think can be really helpful, useful. Go check it out. There's also command specific configuration, which is an RFC we just opened this morning, and I would love for folks to look at. I think it's a missing piece that would really help in terms of teams trying to configure sanely configure commands differently between each other and not have just this global set of config. And also we've got something that we will definitely get to next week, an RFC open for improving the npm signature verification. And that's a whole separate subcommand we're going to introduce that can either be a part of npm audit or part of Doctor, but it's just definitely improving our security and the signature stores that we have today. So please check those out. They're all linked in the agenda. We'll be back next week, and appreciate everybody jumping on this week and having a good discussion today. So talk to you soon.